like to welcome our viewers/listeners to our first episode of Wine Piece, the podcast where I, an avid One Piece fan, make a podcast with my anime-loving One Piece skeptic friend, Mitch, through the lens of we're going to try wines and correlate them to the show as we progress. So, Mitch, give us a little bit of an introduction to maybe yourself and also the wine that we're going to be talking about.
Thanks, Justin. So yeah, I'm the resident wine person, selecting the libations that are going to get me through this journey. How you doing, by the way?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. We're talking about One Piece.
Episode 1, it's exciting. For those of you that haven't, by the way, this may be episode 1, but we do have an episode 0 that is up. So if you want a little bit of information about how we came to this idea, some more information about us, check that out. For now, let's move on to the wine. So today, we're going to be drinking the Cave de Rasteau, the Peyrières Rasteau 2020. I'm going to get into what all that means in a second. First, let me serve you. Would you like some wine?
It's at least 25% of the reason why I'm here. No, I'm excited about this. And so the goal of this is to have a wine that in some way relates to the episode or episodes that we're going to be talking about each time we have a podcast show. And so today we're going to be talking about the first 3 episodes of the One Piece anime, the Romance Dawn arc. And so we have this particular wine that Mitch is going to be talking to us about. And ideally, as we're putting out these episodes, we're also going to be putting the wine that we are going to be trying, so that way viewers would like they can enjoy with us. So, Mitch, tell us a little bit.
If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find information in the comments, in the description below. If you are listening to us on a podcasting app, we'll leave it in the show notes. So, a little bit about this. You're right, there's a theme to this, and we're going to talk about the themes in a second. But before that, since you're putting me on a journey of One Piece discovery, I'm going to put you on a journey of wine discovery.
Sure.
Okay? So you can see, this is a red wine. Okay? And what I want to talk about before we get a little more into it is the concept of classifications and appellations. Okay? Basically, classifications are just ways of naming and categorizing wine styles. So, you know things like red wine and white wine, right? You maybe know that sparkling wine exists, right?
Sure.
One of those classifications is what's known as an appellation. Okay? Appellation is a way to label a wine by its geographical region, from where it's from. So you've probably heard things like, Bordeaux, Napa Valley, things like that.
Sure.
In Europe, these appellations also come with rules regarding how you can make wine and what grapes can be used. Different countries in Europe will have different ways of labeling their appellations and different sort of levels within there, different tiers. But that part's not as important. The important thing to note is that appellation means something for a wine. It's not just telling you, oh yeah, this wine just happens to be made here. Mm-hmm. It's telling you about a style or an origin, right? A little bit more about that. We see this wine's from France. At the most basic level, on the most general level in France, you have what's known as a vin de France, which means literally wine of France.
Okay.
Easy enough. It's not an appellation. All it means is that the grapes came from France, anywhere in France. It could be thousands of miles apart. Well, maybe not thousands. Maybe. The appellations will restrict it more specifically. So within France, you have this area known as the Rhone Valley. The Rhone Valley gets split into north and south, and they make different types of wines. Within the Rhone, the biggest appellation is known as Côte du Rhône. Those grapes can come from anywhere in the Rhone Valley that are approved for making wine. Then you go a little further into it, and you've got Côte du Rhône Village. All of them have to come from specific villages within the Southern Rhone. So you're starting to see how this makes like this little tier system, right?
I'm also realizing that my geographical skills are very shoddy in the real world compared to how excellent they are in the One Piece world. I'm like, oh yes, I'm familiar with the Syrup Village or the different places in the North Blue or East Blue. But please continue on with the real world things that might be more practical. Mm-hmm.
The top level of the Southern Rhone is known as a cru. These are specific areas in the Southern Rhone recognized for high quality wine tradition, and they represent the best places for making wine in the Southern Rhone. It says Rasteau on the bottle. You can see there.
Sure.
It says Rasteau on the bottle. Rasteau is a cru. It's a very specific area within the area surrounding a village known in the Southern Rhone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's important as well is that, like I mentioned before, there's restrictions on what you can make with an appellation. So This appellation, Rasteau, actually restricts what kinds of grapes you can use, and they're grapes that were historically grown in that region. And this is where we get into wine themes.
All right.
We agreed that we want to introduce wine themes for certain maybe characters or concepts as they arise. I can tell you already, I'm going to be thinking about ways to bring up wine themes for all the crew members.
Sure.
So, but the idea is that for certain pivotal moments, maybe for that character or concepts that we see frequently or that arise, those can be accompanied with a wine from that theme so that our wine knowledge grows with the theme. Rasteau, I mentioned, is from the Southern Rhone. It historically produces a wine made from a very famous blend of grapes known as a GSM.
A GSM?
GSM.
All right.
It's a blend of 3 grapes, and you're probably seeing where we're going with this. It's a blend of 3 grapes. They're called Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. They sometimes have different names in different places. The blend works so well that it's been exported to other places as well. So typically, if you're in another wine region outside of here and you see one of the grapes, you'll frequently see the other 2.
Okay.
So that they can blend them together. So why does this all, who's the theme for it? This is the theme for Zoro.
Okay.
The theme for Zoro is going to be GSM.
We're meeting a lot of the main characters in the first 3 arcs, but it is certainly the Zoro build-up and payoff time.
Yep. For the first 3 episodes, it seems like it's the Zoro time, right? 3 grape style, I feel like that works really well. 3 sword style, just base level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, GSM wines tend to be very powerful wines. They're not delicate. They can be maybe a little bit more delicate, but they tend to be really powerful. They can have very high alcohol comparatively for wines. Red wines typically fall in like 13.5%, 14%. This one is 15% alcohol.
Okay.
But even though they have high alcohol, they're powerful. That blending allows for balance, for adaptation, for adjustment, right? And also, I also wanted to introduce this concept of an epiphany wine. So this is a concept a lot in wine circles, right? An epiphany wine is a wine that sparks your love and fascination for wine, right? It's that wine that you're drinking stuff, you're like, oh, I like wine. And then you have the one that makes you stop and say, hold on, there's something different here. My epiphany wine was a Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is another GSM wine from the Southern Rhone, from like very close by to where this was. So because of that, it being my epiphany wine, I thought I'd bring it in today.
Sure, it sounds reasonable. All right. I mean, a big part of what's going to make this podcast enjoyable is seeing someone new to One Piece ideally appreciate it as it comes about. So I think bringing something in so personal just to start is kind of a good show of good faith. Like, all right, I'm looking to enjoy this, even as skeptical as I may be that this is a 1,000+ episode series that every person has hyped and hyped and hyped, not the least of whom is your co-host.
Perfect. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
I'm taking it. That was very good.
I think one of the things that'll be most valuable to viewers is for me not to give too much color commentary. Ideally, it's going to be for you to react and me to potentially give insight or maybe things that you haven't noticed, because especially with the first few episodes, I've seen them more times than I want to admit, and want to get like a real fair, unbiased kind of opinion. Because I might say throughout this kind of series, oh, this references something 200 episodes in, 300 episodes in, 500 episodes in. And that's not really fair to you or towards viewers first getting a feel for it. So tell us a little bit about what happens in the opening part and kind of how you react to it. The good, the bad, the weird.
Okay, so I still took into consideration the fact that they're setting stuff up for the future. So I decided to give this the respect that I feel like it deserves, right? Where I am thinking in the future, I'm trying to figure out things that they're setting out that I can come back to.
Mm-hmm.
So right off the bat, there's a couple of themes that in episodes 1 through 3, I noticed that I think will be important.
Mm-hmm.
First is the idea of a personal ambition, okay? A personal motivation of a character, right? An example, Luffy wants to be king of the pirates.
Sure.
When I say personal ambition, I mean individual to the character,
mm-hmm.
right? Next is this idea of freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll have a lot to talk about just from these episodes, but yeah.
And from that, this sort of contrasting nature of obedience versus partnership. And at its core, Luffy is fundamentally opposed to tyranny.
Sure.
Fundamentally opposed to the concept of absolute power, and he leans towards partnership. And the characters we're seeing, so far at least, even in the first 3 episodes, we're starting to see some villains that are very clearly tyrants. Right off the bat, episode 1, though, some things that stood out to me. The aesthetic was interesting. I like that it literally opens up with a view of the ocean and the horizon, right? The first idea you get is this is a big world. So that makes sense. The aesthetic starts out pretty normal, and they're showing like a dinner party and stuff, and Nami's at the party. But then immediately Alvida and her ship comes in, and you're like, oh, this is weird. This is quirky.
Yeah.
Everyone's afraid of this ship that is not immediately terrifying.
That looks like a cartoon ship.
Indeed, it does.
Small thing, but just looking at it, going into the character design for a lot of the background characters was very Dragon Ball.
Sure.
Like it looks like, I don't know if they had somebody who works with Akira Toriyama or something, but like the background characters specifically looked very much like background characters from Dragon Ball Z. Just throwing that out there.
I can see that.
When we meet Luffy, I love the fact that his first action is to smile and punch. Those are the first 2 things he does.
Well, even to connect back to your theme, we have this idea of freedom, and Luffy is trapped in a barrel and frees himself. He's even happy to be there because he's just like, oh yeah, cool, I have the opportunity to escape. I'm freeing myself from this. It doesn't say that because he doesn't think about it in so many words, but the very first action from Luffy in the series is an act of pursuing freedom.
It's true. He's breaking out of it. One side note that I wrote, Luffy's voice actor is a female, I'm guessing. And you don't have to answer this now, but I did write a note to myself wondering if this changes after the time skip or if they pull a Dragon Ball and they keep the same voice actor throughout.
Well, mild spoilers start. There may be a time skip after a few hundred episodes.
I knew enough about that.
The voice actors stay consistent, I think, is the fairest way for me to answer that. They do a lot of things in flashback, and then there may be different voices. So, for example, if you see Luffy as a kid, it may be a different voice actor. So I'm not positive.
But generally speaking, the main or contemporary timeline character, same voice.
20 plus years, 1,000 plus episodes, all of the actors have stayed the same. And that's actually pretty common across languages. So even if someone is watching the dub or the sub, generally speaking, the voice actors have remained consistent. Okay,
cool. Then we get Luffy's motivation. He wants to be king of the pirates, and to accomplish this, he needs the One Piece. So we now have introduction to the One Piece, which, to be fair, we already got the introduction in
the name, the title,
the opening theme.
Yeah.
Right. Goldie Roger and all that. And one thing that's important that I wrote this down is that he's willing to die for his goal. One, obviously that's a big statement, right? That's a big idea that he's willing to die for his goal. But also the fact that already introducing this possible idea or consequence of death in a show that looks so cartoony, and I have some stuff about it later, but it seemed there's a bit of a disconnect where you're like, are they bluffing? Is somebody actually going to die? So we'll get to that later.
That'll definitely be a topic of discussion because even in this opening episode or 3, like, there are lots of opportunities for death that doesn't really get shown. You know, you have a pirate ship raiding a civilian ship and you don't really see death. It's kind of cartoony, but at the same time, the idea of being willing to die for your dream is incredibly important for all of the main characters, for Luffy, for Koby, for Zoro. That's the thing. It's like almost like a limiter on freedom. You can't be free if you're afraid of death, because that's something that keeps you from doing things that you want to do in the first place.
Yes, the way that, and that feeds into this, right? It gives that idea that freedom is worth it. Freedom is worth death. So give me liberty, give me death, I guess.
Sure.
Next we get introduced to Alvida. Alvida was funny, a quirky character. She gets offended by the monster comment. They mentioned she's a monster. But what's funny to me is that she does seem to be modeled after an Oni. Right? The proportions are there, like Japanese demons. She has an iron club, which is a weapon for Oni in Japanese video. And later on, with some other things that I've seen, it seems to be a recurring theme of people getting offended by very obvious things.
Part of the idea of the antithesis of freedom is control, and so a lot of the tyrants want to be in complete control. The way they're seen, the way they're discussed or communicated with. For Alvida, she doesn't even want anyone to comment on anything about her unless it's positive, unless it's subservience. And so right away, the first act of defiance of that kind of tyranny is Luffy saying something negative about her. Who's this hag? And everyone panics because, like, you can't say that. And he's like, well, I'm free to do whatever I want. Like, she seems mean.
Fair enough. From there, we get told that we're in the peak of the Great Pirate Era, which is a little bit of information that I have no context for yet. But
because now you know two different pirate groups, right? Yep. You know Luffy and Alvida. Luffy has no crew. Alvida has a crew that doesn't have a lot of personality or conversations outside of Alvida showing that she's in charge.
But it does insinuate that there obviously are a variety of pirate groups.
Sure.
And that they are split into groups. We know that. We meet Koby. Koby wants to join the Navy. My question about that, and I'm throwing this out into the void, this is not inviting a spoiler, but if they join the Navy, do they come back later as a villain? Because we are introduced to this concept that pirates and the Navy are enemies, right? Koby says that pirates are the bad guys. Our protagonist is a pirate. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out, especially if we start seeing other characters that might have ties to the Navy.
Yeah, without getting into spoilers, although I also feel like part of the fun for this, for people that have seen One Piece, is going to be for me to give sly spoilers that no one but people that have already have seen it will know. But the idea that there is good or evil is kind of antithetical to the concept of freedom. Like, freedom means freedom to do good or freedom to do evil. And Luffy, in essence, is all about freedom. So while Koby may be like looking to join the Marines, that doesn't necessarily the Marines are all good or all evil. There will be both. However, the Marines tend to be for a structure to the world. The Marines are an organized structure, whereas Luffy is completely the opposite of structure. There's no structure that I want to live by besides my own. So Koby's idea is probably better for the many, and whether or not he returns as a good person or bad person is not necessarily the issue here. It's more of Koby is looking for the structure, Luffy is looking for the freedom. They may both get along because their intentions are good, however the way they go about it is different.
Interesting. Okay, so that actually reminds me, by the way, so we both have taught classes related to literature and writing, and one of was literally the first literature course I ever taught. The theme was heroes and villains, and one thing that I made very clear in there is this idea that you shouldn't take hero or villain to automatically mean good or bad.
Sure.
But rather, hero is the character that is embodying what is considered the main point or even morality of the story. And the villain is the person that is opposing that. More than antagonist or protagonist, because you have stories where the hero is not the protagonist. You have stories where the hero, the one who embodies the vibe of the story, is actually a pretty bad person.
Sure.
Right? So that made me think of that. So I'll keep that one in mind, that freedom, the big thing I latched onto, which is freedom, is clearly a thing, and it's going to be a little more complicated.
Well, even to look at these opening episodes, Koby is not free. Like, Koby is trapped seemingly on penalty of death or complete subservience to Alvida, and Luffy's goal isn't necessarily to free Koby. Luffy's goal is just freedom, and Koby has to kind of learn how to free themselves. Like, he kind of has to do it.
So basically, if Koby wanted to just stay in service of Alvida, that's fine. That's Koby's decision. That's their decision.
Luffy wouldn't have done anything. Notice Luffy doesn't even attack anybody really. Like he doesn't look to save Koby until Koby insults Alvida too, and then Luffy goes from I don't like you to there you go, I appreciate you, bud, and then he just is ready to go to war.
It's a good transition because I have notes here about the first fight, and you know me, you know that we both have done martial arts, and I love me fights, and I love breaking down fights, and we've talked about how we love breaking down fights. The first fight, things I grabbed from it, uses a lot of comedy. It's very goofy, slapsticky, whatever.
You kind of have to with this power. You have a rubber man. Like there's I would argue that it becomes cool at certain times, but even at its coolest, it's
Rubber stretchy man.
Yeah.
Yep. He enjoys the element of surprise. We learned that about Luffy. There's a scene where he's like running past the mast and he leaves his hand there, and then Gum Gum rockets back and hits a bunch of people like bowling pins. Basically,
scares everyone right away.
We see that he's stretchy. I do like that he shows his stretchiness in a way that's surprising to everybody. Going back to that element of surprise, a little more creative than just like watch me stretch. And then his Gum Gum pistol against Alvida. It's a one-shot win against a supposedly very strong opponent. So we know right off the bat
the strongest pirate that we have seen to this point.
Yep. We already know that he can one-shot the strongest pirate that we know. Somebody that all of the characters that we've met so far are terrified of.
And we've seen his invulnerability too, because he gets hit by that giant club that was destroying everything, and he takes it and smiles.
Yep. Also, I'm taking notes on all of the Gum Gum moves, all of the devil powers that we see. I'm keeping a running list of like what these moves are. So we got Gum Gum Rocket and Gum Gum Pistol so far. From there, we meet Nami. We see she's a thief. She's sneaking around, but we don't really get a lot in the first episode. And then just a couple things that are mentioned. They mentioned the Grand Line as a pirate graveyard. So cool. Grand Line is dangerous and scary.
Yeah, a little bit of world building mythos. We don't necessarily know what that means. A lot of the times you're going to get key terms that you'll forget before they actually show up again for you to like see. The Grand Line is something that's big enough, that's pivotal to the world, so they mention that quite a bit. But there will be little things, there will be names, there will be flashbacks where I, as someone who's seen all of the episodes, will be like, look, first appearance of, and you'll be like, they didn't even say that person's name, why do I need to know that? I'm like, yeah, you don't, but...
I mean, I just know that the One Piece is in the Grand Line, that the One Piece is the name of the treasure in the Grand Line. But I like that they set it up immediately as a pirate graveyard, so it gives you that sense of... I feel like there's a decision made there where they could have easily been like this land of riches and just start with all the positives, and instead they actually start with negatives.
Well, it kind of gives you a sense of scale for the world too, because you see Luffy isn't even there yet, and he seems to be relatively overpowered, one-shotting another captain. This captain has a club that is destroying lots of things seemingly simply. One shot is nearly destroying a building or a room or whatever. So the fact that they're not on the Grand Line, hearing that the Grand Line is a pirate graveyard, does add a little bit of potential worry to it. At the same time, Luffy's not having any issue now, so his goal doesn't seem so ridiculous. But at the same time, if he's hearing that now and we're getting a sense of this is the strength of what's outside of the Grand Line better pay off.
Yeah. And then we get to the last little notes that I made of for this episode. One, we see Zoro's being held at the Navy base, which makes it really interesting because he's a pirate hunter, but he's being held by the Navy. So we now have a power binary that's becoming more complicated, right?
Something is awkward because he's a bounty hunter, and bounty hunters are state sanctioned.
Right.
That's okay.
It's very much the opposite of the enemy of an enemy is my friend, because they're technically both after pirates, but it's fine. Koby becomes Luffy's first crewmate in a sense. Not officially, but he's the first person to then go with Luffy on his adventure.
Certainly his first friend. Yeah.
And then I just wrote here a very small note, Zoro is Jesus, because he's crucified. And they actually do specifically translate something as crucifixion, as crucified. So Zoro is Jesus. And he gets a metal music cue, which I thought was really cool.
Sure. Interesting for three sword style, the three earrings, having some kind of odd tie to the Holy Trinity. Yeah.
Japanese Jesus.
In a mild spoiler.
No.
there will be discussions of religion.
Okay. And that's all I had for episode 1.
Awesome. I mean, yeah. So let's get into Zoro himself.
Ooh, man.
Because, like,
I love Zoro.
Zoro is a character that no one really dislikes. It's hard to dislike Zoro. He's kind of quiet. He's kind of a badass right off the start. Tell us a little bit why is Zoro being crucified if he's supposed to be state sanctioned?
All right, so first, another aesthetic thing.
Mhm.
They had an interesting like pastel theme to the town, so that was really interesting. It made it look kind of like a children's book, so that was kind of interesting there. It's interesting that the townsfolk seem to be equally afraid of Zoro and the Navy captain. I think there was a thing where like Luffy mentions one name, people cower. He mentions the other name, people cower.
Yeah. They hear pirate hunter Zoro, they flinch, and then Axe Hand Morgan, the leader of the Marines, and also flinch.
Yep. We get to the scene where the little girl gives the onigiri to Zoro, and a little dramatic irony with Koby saying, "Thank God the Navy's here. The girl is safe now," and that does not happen.
Indeed, it does not.
And I just literally wrote in all caps the onigiri exclamation point times 4. How dare they? Listen, it's really easy to make me care about a character, especially a little kid. And you have this child who's trying to give this wonderful little onigiri.
And know your feeling with food too. Like you say, like this is oddly. You know what's funny? Until now, I haven't thought about that as like being your thing. Is like this is how I share my friendship is with food.
And food today.
that'll be a recurring joke that I make at some point. Is you give food to somebody in the One Piece world, and you have a friend.
Also, I will say, food is what got me into wine. Believe it or not, started that way. Then we get Captain Morgan. I love that they picked Captain Morgan.
Just like, of course.
I mean, it's meant to be. We're drinking. They give you a son who's this entitled, typical brat. Helmeppo, is it?
Helmeppo.
God. Helmeppo no. We're just gonna leave that there. It is interesting that establishes, by having this son who's this entitled little brat, it establishes the Navy as a sort of political elite, which I wasn't expecting. Because I was expecting Navy, military. I thought, and seeing the themes of freedom, I thought it was just going to be like, tyrannical leaders and stuff. I didn't expect this person lording over this town like a king with his bratty little son.
Well, that kind of is the blurry line between good and evil in this series. Because we meet Koby. Koby seems to be a paragon. Like, Koby wants to take out the pirates, prevent bad things from happening, and the way that they want to do that is by becoming a Marine to protect people. And then our first introduction to actual Marines is crucifying someone that kind of works for the government just because he protected a young girl from being attacked by a dog. And
the one who saves the girl from the Navy is Luffy, who's the pirate who's supposed to be a bad guy.
Well, again, his thing is not good or evil, it's freedom. Yep. Comes across Zoro as incarcerated as you can be. Yeah. Not being fed. Oh man, the tragedy of that,
when Zoro eats the dirty onigiri and just says "Gochiso-sama," it's just like, thank you for this meal. And that got me. That got me right here.
Luffy too, because he was unsure, and then a mix of the backstory, and then also feeding him the dirty rice ball, which is funny because Luffy being really, you want to eat that? I'm not sure that happens again. I'm trying to think when does Luffy appalled at food? I'm not sure that maybe a specific kind of food, but still, he saw Zoro do that and was like, that's my guy.
One other thing too is that so do you know about the itadakimasu gochiso-sama? So basically, you start off meals.
The prayer appreciation for.
You start off meals in Japanese with itadakimasu, which is basically I humbly receive this, and then you end it with gochiso-sama, which literally means it was a feast. And so I love that context in there as well, that it does have that meaning. So one thing that stood out to me here, though, once we really get into characters, I already like Zoro a lot, just because he's cool, and I think everybody who sees him,
good color scheme,
edgy enough.
He's got all the voice acting for Zoro is incredible. Again, it's subbed or dubbed. Both do a fantastic job.
I wrote a note here. Zoro's Japanese voice actor is great. It that the voice actor makes Zoro feel much more relatable and feel younger, almost like a big brother vibe, which I like. But here's the thing that really stood out to me. Once I got past the like, ooh, Zoro cool, right? He's got green hair. He's coded very Japanese.
Sure.
He has a katana. He has that wrap belt thingy around his middle.
Haramaki? I should know off the top of my head.
Helmeppo is coded very Western.
Our viewers would know. I have a master's degree not in Japanese. I'm a terrible fan.
Helmeppo is coded very Western. He has a saber. He has blonde hair. He's drinking wine.
So now I'm a bad guy for this? Not the tie into wine that I would have.
What's interesting is there seems to be this like Japanese nationalist thing. And if there's one thing I know about One Piece and One Piece fans who really get into it is that it can definitely get political, right?
Sure.
This is interesting to me seeing the like kind of nationalist thing, looking at the Navy as possible villains. Because Oda's from southern Japan, from Kumamoto. Helmeppo is exploitative of the town, which is a feeling that is often felt in Okinawa, specifically, in regards to Navy bases on Okinawa. And when I dug a little bit deeper into Kumamoto, where Oda is from, it does have military bases.
Okay.
It is in the south of Japan, not close, quote unquote, right, to Okinawa. Nothing's really close to Okinawa, but it is culturally from a part of Japan that would be sympathetic to Okinawa.
Okay.
And the fact that it also has military bases, I thought that was interesting that there might already be some like pro-Japanese things going on.
And so this dynamic between the clearly Japanese character with a more Western kind of law or military in place.
Military presence I could imagine that being something that might be sympathetic to anyone either from that region or just something that reads very easily for somebody within that cultural context.
Okay.
Then I have here just some plot stuff. Morgan asks for tribute, so he comes off as a mob boss. And he is kind of coded Yakuza style-ish in a way, so there are some elements there, but the big thing is just he's asking for tribute. Like he's a tyrant.
He's trying to create almost like a religion around himself. I mean, building a statue of yourself is about as tyrannical as you can get.
I put that it looked like Christ the Redeemer, so that's something there. They asked this question, what's wrong with being a pirate? Or at least they're answering the question, what's wrong with being a pirate? And the answers we get pirates are despicable, just vaguely, but no specifics. I think it's important that we don't get specifics, because we've seen very clear specifics of what makes the Navy terrible.
Sure.
And we've seen specifics about Alvida just being a violent person. But there's a difference, right? Alvida is just a pirate who's looking to steal stuff.
Sure. And again, like we said earlier, didn't actually kill anybody. Did try to rob them, but so did Nami.
We're getting with Captain Morgan and his crew that this seems to be acceptable, or at least accepted, right? Zoro is
kind of institutionalized theft.
Institutionalized tyranny. Tyrant. Zoro is proud of his actions. He's not ashamed of the things he's done.
Sure.
I think that's an important one because that goes back to something with Luffy. I have some notes about pride later. And Zoro wants to accomplish his goals. So we have a personal ambition thing.
Yeah, Zoro wants to be the greatest swordsman.
Right. So we have that personal ambition, which again helps us relate to these characters. And it seems like, again, going forward, what's going to identify characters for me as heroic, not heroic, good, bad, is do they have a clear personal ambition, and are they willing to cooperate and respect the freedom of other individuals in order to accomplish it?
Well, I think one of the things that makes a good character too is having the primary goal and seeing how that intersects with the day-to-day life. Yeah. Because how often are they going to have to go against that? Can someone like Luffy, who seems to be single-track minded, vary from that? I want to be king of the pirates. Okay, but what else do you want to do? What does that even mean? You know, is the king of pirates the controller over the world? Does it mean something else specifically for him? Does it mean the same thing for everyone? It's kind of an interesting question to even get into here.
I agree. I like it. We mentioned the statue, right? So Morgan's greatness looks like Christ the Redeemer. I love that Luffy accidentally brings down the statue.
Oh, yeah.
So foreshadowing, maybe, I don't know, right? Is he going to accidentally bring down the Navy? Because I'm not going to lie, from what it's looking like right now, if Luffy were to do something like to bring down this tyrannical power, he wouldn't do it because he wants to bring them down. It's because they got in his way.
Right. It's
like, I want to get to the One Piece. You're in my way. I gotta bring you down now.
His pursuit of freedom tends to lead to the freedom of others, and puts him in contrast or in conflict with anyone that's trying to limit the freedom of others. And so it's not so much that if you're the person in charge, you're inherently bad. Luffy wasn't out to get Axe Hand Morgan to begin with, but because Axe Hand Morgan is the person stopping freedom from everyone else, he inevitably ends up in conflict with Luffy.
Makes sense. My last little notes, Nami's still sneaking.
Of course.
Koby wants to be an honorable Marine, right? And Helmeppo never intended to honor the agreement. That's interesting, that he was going to execute Zoro before the 1 month that he said. So there's this idea of broken promises, broken negotiations, Zoro stoicism, and I don't want to say naivete because he wasn't being naive, right? He probably went into it knowing full well that things could happen, right?
He trusted someone at their word in the goal of being a good person. Like his goal is not to kill; it's to be the greatest swordsman. Yeah. And so he was in this position of, do I kill someone or trust someone? And Zoro doesn't want to just kill people for no reason. And so he decided to trust, and that got him trapped.
And then we have that Zoro, he criticized Captain Morgan for using soldiers like cronies. He dehumanizes them and their individual desires. So we get that Zoro also has this importance placed on individual desire, personal ambition, all that. And my last little point, small thing, Luffy's bulletproof.
Oh, yeah.
So we've already seen him be hit by a club and be fine. He's bulletproof. So we're starting to get to this level of like, what hurts Luffy?
His first crew member is a swordsman too, so the thing that we think might hurt him, the hand of Axe Hand Morgan, or the axe of Axe Hand Morgan, is blocked by his very first crewmate. So even though it seems like he might finally be able to take damage from something, his very first crewmate is there to help him be supported in the way that he needs. What limitations he may have, he is finding solved by allies.
Little not a spoiler, but a little foreshadowing, something to think about. Because, so somebody else that I know that watches One Piece put a thought in my head that I've been tracking.
Okay.
And he's like, he told me, notice that Zoro always fights the same opponent. Same type of opponent. That was what he said. And the thing that I'm seeing so far is Zoro always fights people who use blades. But anyway.
Actually, now that I think about it, the first person Luffy saves is Koby, and in order to get from location A to location B, he needs Koby to get there, because the last time he set sail on his own, he would have died in a barrel had it not been for luck. Instead, Koby, who has base level nautical skills, was able to navigate Luffy from point A to point B. So even then, his temporary crewmate helped him.
Fair enough. So he does get help by his friends.
Has to.
I like it. And that's all I have for episode 2. I feel like episode 2, not that it didn't have as much, but it's still working to set things up. Episode 1 being the first episode had a bunch of stuff. Whereas episode 2 really did focus on Zoro, and I love it for that. One thing that I'm already starting to notice related to pace, right? If this were an anime, a modern anime, episode 2 we would already have 2 to 3 characters. 2 to 3 like party members, if you will. Episode 2 we're introduced to Zoro, and we're getting into episode 3, but we still haven't gotten there. Like, we know Nami's coming on board, but they are going slower and taking their time to give us other characters. Like, we're learning about Luffy, but first episode was really more learning about Koby and the world. Episode 2 was learning about Zoro. Now episode 3 we're going to put a little bit more of not a conclusion, but close up a little bit of Zoro's introduction. Whereas in a lot of shows that maybe were 12 or even 24 episode runs, we'd be closing in on a third character by now.
Something that is happening just in this first few episodes is we will be told who a character is, get a sense of who that character is, and then by the time we meet that character, have a pretty good idea, and as we meet them, our minds are going to change a little bit. And everyone's scared of Zoro, everyone's scared of Zoro, everyone's scared of Zoro. We meet Zoro, and he's intimidating, as we can imagine. You know, he's got a look on his face that says, yeah, this definitely looks like somebody that could cut people up. But then we hear from him, and we're like, oh, all right, there's a little bit more to this person than just violence. You know, he's got some care there. He's got some honorable actions, honorable thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, I mean, with Nami, we've seen Nami every episode multiple times already. We don't know that she's Nami yet.
Nope.
I know she's Nami, but like, we don't know who she is. We just know she's a thief. She's going around stealing stuff, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're setting this up where you could 100% give us an idea of who Nami is, that she's a thief, and wrap everything up and get her to join the crew in an episode.
Mm-hmm.
We're going into episode 3, and I have a note there about it, but basically Nami, she seems, so far we've seen her operating independently from, but also parallel to Luffy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's already a lot of information for somebody that we don't know yet.
Right.
All right, episode 3.
Episode 3.
Zoro. It's better to survive a pirate than die at the hands of the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thought, right? And I'm sure that there's going to be that gray zone that a lot of characters are going to fall into, where I may not want to be a pirate, but I don't want to die yet.
My primary goal, my primary ambition is to be the world's greatest swordsman.
Right.
You can't do that if you're dead.
Exactly. It's one thing dying in a sword battle with the greatest swordsman. It's another
Mm-hmm.
thing dying completely apart from that.
Yeah.
It's not in pursuit of the goal.
And you could almost argue that Luffy blackmails Zoro into joining the crew. Or maybe you want to take this position like I would, which is like he's giving him autonomy to choose, and also Luffy wants to make some choices and says like, hey, look, these are your options. I can save you, but I want you to join my crew. Or you can kind of keep your own choice, but you're going to die. It is what it is.
We also learned a little bit about the devil fruit, and just a note that I have here that the secret to them lies in the Grand Line. So we now have another level to the Grand Line. It's not just where One Piece is.
Mm-hmm.
The One Piece is. It's also like we're going to learn more about devil fruit. I have a note here that I'm going to wait to confirm this with later episodes, but
I think it's worth to say the thought out loud. If it's not something you've heard from outside, I think conjecture is part of the fun. And so yeah, if you have a thought, I think being like I called it is a.
This one isn't so much about anything in the future like that. It's just something that I'm seeing that I'm trying to see if it's a recurring theme.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just like the personal ambition thing. Luffy presents Zoro with his swords, and they're coded as treasures.
Mm-hmm.
So that we now have, and it's pirates. So like obviously there's always a treasure theme.
Yeah.
But this idea of treasure. We have the One Piece that's the big treasure, but now we have Zoro with his own treasure. His 3-sword style, absolute ridiculousness. Absolutely love it.
Of course.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's one of the most common like themes that people like to discuss is, does that not tear up your teeth?
I don't care.
There are conversations on how does he communicate when he's got a sword in his mouth. Some people say that he just is communicating from the heart, and I love that. That's complete nonsense. It's great. I love it.
I am here for the 3-sword style. It is absolute insanity.
What kind of neck strength do you have to have? Like,
we get into the ambition that he's only going with Luffy in order to fulfill his own ambition. That he wants to be the world's greatest swordsman. That does also introduce, though, a possible like transitory nature to the Straw Hat Crew, where people
Mm-hmm.
can join and leave, and
Mm-hmm.
that Luffy wouldn't stop them. Like, it's you go with me as long as you want, and if you need to leave, that's it. We'll see if that is what happens. If not, so I like that like this is a like accountability thing. Zoro tells Luffy, you'd better accept responsibility and apologize to me. It's consequence for
Mm-hmm.
stakes that hold Luffy accountable. Like, I'm going along with you, and
Mm-hmm.
if I don't get to go on and fulfill my ambition, like, that's on you.
yeah. Like I'm agreeing to your concept of freedom, but if you break from that, I'm out.
Yep.
And Luffy doesn't even flinch. Like, yeah, all right.
He doesn't have cronies.
Mm-hmm.
It's partnership. Again, I said at the beginning, right, that obedience versus partnership. It is
Mm-hmm.
a partnership. People are here as willing participators who are working together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you allow someone else's priorities to go above yours, that is your decision that you are making as a partner, as a fully conscious actor in this.
Well, because it's impractical to not have a leader.
Yep.
And I think these characters know it. Luffy wants to be the leader in this kind of journey towards freedom, but he doesn't view leadership as you have to follow what I say and sacrifice yourself, because that's not fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, he knows that he needs help from others, but I think there's a kind of almost like a trade. Like, if I'm going to be your leader, Zoro, I need to be willing to put my life in your hands just like I'm asking you to do for me. And so even as we get into the actual fight itself, you see Luffy being willing to step in front of bullet fire for Zoro. Granted, Luffy's bulletproof, but even so, towards the end of the fight, he's putting himself in the line of fire from bladed weapons.
I have that here, that Luffy attacks Helmeppo despite the fact that Captain Morgan's behind him. It's this immediate trust in Zoro of like, I'm going to do this, you're going to get me out of this, right? I've already mentioned a couple times, but it's worth noting that the Navy really is being defined in these first episodes as like this obedience to authority. Authority over all else, right? Not a partnership, you have your leader. I like that the soldiers do actually celebrate at the end their freedom from Captain Morgan. It would have been really easy to keep them as nameless cronies who just like, Captain Morgan's done, and they all run away and like, oh no, or everybody's dead or something, right? But it doesn't happen. They actually celebrate it. The town is liberated by Luffy. Luffy is grand liberator, talking into more political perspectives there.
And to show that Luffy is also trying to make others liberate themselves, when he finally is looking to separate from Koby, has this like great scene where he's like, nah, actually, do you know where Koby was the last couple of years? He was a pirate. Did you know he was with pirates? You know that thing that's going to keep him from his dream? If you found out about this, he was definitely a pirate. And instead, Koby has to like actually like stand up for himself and shut Luffy up. And Luffy kind of knows this, and so Kobe's now fighting for his own freedom rather than living off of Luffy or just being given things from the Marines. The Marines aren't looking to just give charity away. They're not looking to just let every random person join for no reason. And they especially don't want pirates infiltrating, because that could lead to a lot of issues if you have pirates within the military ranks.
That reminds me. So that does bring up the, like, once a pirate, always a pirate idea, right? Is it this, like, scar on the individual that they're a pirate? But also, I put here that Luffy's not going to stop somebody from achieving the personal motivation, but you just made me realize that also he's going to challenge you to get that. Like, you're going to have to work for it, right? I think that was interesting because when I was watching that scene with Luffy talking about Kobe's time as a pirate, part of me was like, oh yeah, he's just like trying to psych him out. But like the joke keeps going and Luffy doesn't stop until Kobe punches him. And you get to the point where you're like, is Luffy that dumb? Which he could be. Or is he just like...
The safe bet to that question is always yes, Luffy is that dumb. But in this case, you're right. He's got a kind of an emotional intelligence that seems strange combined with his entire lack of practical intelligence.
It's that idea of like, I need to show you that you can fight for it, right? The other, Zoro doesn't need that. Zoro does fight for his stuff, no problem. It's literally about fighting. But Kobe needs to fight for it. So yeah, and then that brings us to the end of episode 3. It's fun. I like that. I like what's being laid down. I like the rafters, the structure that's being laid down. I like how it's being implemented. I'm still wondering how certain things are going to work with, comedy and action. So far it's been okay, but it's also been very base level action stuff. And they left me with, curiosity about Nami. She's looking for Buggy. Like, okay, cool, we have some stuff that's going on. So as of right now, Oda has effectively done my one of my first things, which is I want to see how big this world gets. And in order to do that, I need to be interested in the world being massive from the beginning. And so far, we're having that. We're having these like overlaps where the world, like I said before, right? The world should be able to grow in a way that's overlapping. You shouldn't just be adding stuff on there. There should be things that intersect. That makes it feel more genuine. And even in the first 3 episodes, we have this undercurrent of Nami's motivation and story that allows for then things to continue, rather than next episode just introduce somebody and like, oh, that's it, new story.
Sure. I think the concept that fans that have seen the entire series will say, or like the entire series as it is now, versus the thing that new fans will get to, is the distinction between build up and payoff. And anyone that's seen 1,000 episodes would be like, just wait, it's just building. But for the show to be good, there has to be payoffs per episode. Like, it has to be payoffs per scene. And so it's good to notice that there's a lot of build up here, but it's just as reasonable to look for, okay, what's the payoff that I'm getting? And so, like, for the first couple of episodes, we have some fights. You know, we get a little bit of the background world building with, this person has a devil fruit, but we get a payoff because he uses that devil fruit. We have a little bit of build up on the idea of this bounty hunter Zoro being like this scary, terrifying monster. And while it's a little bit different than that, he's actually a super cool, like, kind, honorable person. We get that payoff because he whoops some ass. And so, as we kind of go through this, I think the discussion of build-up versus payoff is going to be an interesting one, because there may be a series of episodes, an arc, where I'm like, this is just a build-up. And you're like, yeah, but we've gotten through 5 episodes without a payoff. We need that. I think that's a fair critique of the show. First 3 episodes, I think it does a lot of what you want out of the opening.
I think what also it's done that, and this is more a me specific thing, I'm an extraordinarily character-driven observer or consumer of media, right? When I hear people talking about various plot points and development plot and world building, my eyes glaze over a little bit, because that, if I wanted to know that, I'll watch a recap or I'll look at a map.
Sure.
Right? And I love looking at fantasy maps. Those are cool. But what makes it interesting for me is character motivation, character stories, and just character things, right? I have done it many times, read fantastic books with basically zero plot, but just, I love the character.
Yeah, great dialogue between people versus just, you could tell us all of the structure of the One Piece world. These are the rules of Devil Fruits. These are the rules of the Marines. These are the rules of it. But unless you care about the characters involved, it doesn't matter. Like, I cared about Zoro because he was trying to eat a dirty rice ball. Like, it gets you. Like, I care about Koby because, like, he's this little kid. He's this little kid that's in a bad situation and wants to be happy and do good things.
But I also like Luffy, which, this is the thing. We've talked about this a lot. There's a lot of anime where the worst character is the main character. But I want to see Luffy do stuff because he makes other characters better.
He does, and I think it's both true that he is probably the least intelligent character in the show, while also being the character that you root for. Or at least you hope to root for. I think the thing that puts him in contrast, but in a positive way, from characters like Naruto or Goku or Tanjiro or Deku or any of those characters, is that his lack of intelligence gives him more options. If you can intellectualize everything, then maybe there's a little bit of nuance. Maybe you can talk your way out of it. Luffy's not smart enough to talk his way out of it.
He's also not held back by, like, what should be common sense.
Yeah, he's not held back by doubt. There's no doubt. All right, you want to do your own thing? I want to do something different. I'm out. Or, all right, you're in my way? Well, it looks like we're fighting. Cool. You gave me food? All right, maybe you're cool.
He's extremely unassuming in that sense, right? And I mean, that was also the first fight with Alvita, right? Like, you're not expecting anything, and they're like, oh crap, this man just punched this woman, one shot, done. So that dynamic's interesting, right? This character you don't assume anything of. He's goofy, he's stretchy, but he's powerful.
And decisive.
In a lot of ways.
He's very decisive. I think confidence and decisiveness is one of the most attractive qualities towards a main character. It just sometimes gets annoying or distracting if they talk about it too much or philosophize to the point where that overwhelms the plot. No, Luffy doesn't do any of that.
You know, that actually reminds me of a conversation I have all the time with my wife, actually, where there's a big difference between something being complex and complicated.
Okay.
Or complex, complicated, and difficult, right? And just because a situation is complex does not mean the solution can't be simple, right? Because you can always kind of bring it back. And Luffy's that, where it's like, at its heart, right? If I'm expanding this out, right? At its heart, the Navy is this tyrannical institution that is subjugating people and whatever. Let's just say from this, right?
At least Axan Morgan is. We might see the other Marines as possibly better, but yes.
Like as an example, right? You have this, and I'm sure that can open up a world of complexity from, well, they're not all bad actors, and there's bad people, there's good people, and I'm sure there's places where it's good, right? And like Luffy can go into that if he really wanted to just end everything and be like, we'll just get rid of the bad people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you can't argue with it. You're like, I mean, yeah, that is it. Is it more complicated than that to get it done? Sure. Like, but it is simple. You just get rid of the bad people.
Yeah, you can't always punch the villain and destroy all of their idols.
Or can you?
But sometimes
it's an option.
Just throw hands and see what happens.
Violence isn't the answer, but it is an answer.
Like, especially if you can just leave afterwards. Should I do this? I don't know, but I can get on a boat now and bounce, so cool.
So, now that we're done, do you have questions?
Honestly, you've been pretty holistic in looking at these things. I do have a question. So we have these first 3 episodes. At the end of the 3rd episode, Luffy and Zoro leave. And so we have a fair amount of characters that they're leaving behind, possibly to never see again. Of these opening 3 episodes, what are some of the characters that you would hope to see again in the future? If not 1 episode from now, 10, 20, 100. You mentioned, do we see Koby come back again as evil? Yeah, do you want to see that again?
That's my big one. I want to see Koby again. Because they've already introduced such an interesting dynamic with him, right?
Yeah.
They've already had him punch Luffy. Right? In a way, this is the...
And be friends. Yeah. Somehow both. they fight each other and leave and are like, oh, I'm going to miss you, friend.
I'd be interested in... Like, this is just me, my literature brain working. I would love to see Koby punch Luffy again in, like, either a really dramatic thing where they're just completely opposed to each other in goals and stuff, but in ways that are complex and deep and personal. I'd also love to see like Koby punch Luffy to snap him out of something. I just want to see Koby punch Luffy again because they already did it. Right. Koby is the first person we've seen effectively beat Luffy. And granted, Luffy let Koby beat him.
I mean, and then he gave it right back.
That's the thing, like, right? But at the end of the day, Koby got what he wanted, which is Luffy to shut up.
Yeah.
No one else has gotten Luffy to shut up or to do anything that he didn't want to do.
Right.
Sure, he probably did want to, but that's the idea, is that even if it's a sham fight, somebody beat Luffy in that sense. So I want to see Koby come back. I would love to see Koby come back with, like, older, muscular, or whatever, and, like, in the Navy and doing crazy things and like complicated world stuff. I'd be down for that. 100%. Sure. The other, actually, Game of Thrones reference. Okay. If Koby could come back in a way almost like Arya Stark did, right? Like, I have learned skills.
Koby is trying to. Like, they're saying like they want to be with the military, want to join the Navy, so that would make sense.
I can imagine.
I can tell you nothing. But fair. No, I think that's a good thing. Like, if you have this idea of this character is based on their ambition, if we don't see the ambition pay off, what was the point of the character?
I could also see somebody like Alvida coming back, right? I was looking at episode titles and I saw Helmeppo's name pop up somewhere in an episode title. So I was like, okay, I don't need him back. I don't know. I could, but if everyone else I can give and take, I want to see Koby again.
I think the named character. So if you remember Helmeppo, if you remember Axe Hand Morgan, I think anytime a named character comes back, it can be interesting, assuming that there's some kind of change to their character in that time. And I think that's what builds the world. So Koby, we kind of have an expected change. Koby's trying to improve or grow or gain some kind of strength on their own. If any of the other characters, Helmeppo, Axe Hand, the little girl who made the rice balls, at some point you need to have like a change in their character. But I think it's worthwhile discussion to think like who kind of stood out from this arc or this group of episodes, and who would you like to see back? I'm never going to tell you whether or not they do come back, but I think it's an interesting question kind of across the board, because even in my first viewing, I was like, I hope that character comes back. And some of them have, some of them haven't. And some, even after 1,000 episodes, you have the entire One Piece community being like, is that this character? Is that this character from 1,000 episodes ago? Tell me that's this character.
Absolutely insane.
I will want to tell you that in one of the upcoming arcs that I want that character to come back. However, by saying that, I would be guaranteeing that that character has not come back yet. So even then, I probably won't. Got
it. Okay. So,
I will leave nothing except I agree with you. That character coming back would be cool.
Yep.
That was it for episode 1 of the One Piece podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe below. It helps us, get to other people.
Share the video with your friends.
Share the video with your friends. Share the video with your enemies, whoever you want to share it with.
It's all about freedom.
Do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Luffy would approve.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this
We want you
podcast
to
on
be able to.
If you're listening to this podcast on a podcast app, make sure that you're subscribed so you get updates when the episodes come out. And leave us a review, 5-star review only.
Minimal spoilers, or if you give spoilers, I'm going to be the only one that gets to read the comments. Although that's kind of fun. I'll probably respond to some of them. Like, be cool, don't say that.
Fair enough. All right, well, thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.